Good afternoon, everyone. We're just going to give it a little bit of time for people to connect, but I hope everyone's having a good day so far. And thank you for taking the time to come join us this afternoon. Those that are just joining, we're just going to give it another minute just to let people come off their previous calls and things and connect. But welcome. Hope everyone's having a good day. Right, okay, I think we can maybe make a start and let other people kind of connect as we go. So welcome everyone to our town hall, which is all about our recently fully released retail media certification program. So hopefully you're all here because you're interested in learning more about what this entails and how you can get involved. If you want to go to the agenda slide, we can go through kind of some of the things we're going to cover this afternoon. So kind of taking it initially back to how this all started. Mary Claire will give a kind of nice overview as to why we need standards and certification for retail media and a bit more of an overview about the work that we've done in that area. We'll then dive deeper into the certification program itself, so giving you more insight into kind of who can be certified, how it all works, how long it's valid for, and how it works in conjunction with other programs across the European landscape. You'll also learn a bit more about the benefits to being certified, and a bit more, if you're on the agency side, how you can really support this program. And we'll also share all the resources that are available as well. And as it is a town hall, the main purpose of this session is to really try and get your questions answered. So obviously we'll try and cover as much sort of top level information as we can in the first part of this session, but we do encourage any questions that you have to be asked as well. So at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to find a Q&A box. So any questions that come up for you as we go through. As I say, there's no silly questions, so please do ask them. And we've got some good dedicated time at the end to try and address those for you as best we can. So yeah, keep that in mind as we go through and make sure that you put those in the box as we continue. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our Industry Development Insights Director, Mary Claire, who has been integral to this programme and who can lead you through the work that has been done here. Over to you, Mary Claire.
Thanks, Lauren. Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us. So going to, as Lauren said, start with some background and some groundwork in kind of why we have worked on standards and certification for retail media. So I always start with this this graph. Those of you that have seen me present before will have seen me use this. But essentially, this is kind of really integral to thinking about how we devise standards for retail media. The reason I say that is because this shows where the budgets are shifting from into retail media. So actually, we're not looking at net new money here. We're looking at existing media money that is shifting into retail media pots. And what we found from our last year's attitudes to retail media survey is that actually the budgets driving the investment here tend to be performance and brand. So trade is a real big part of it, but actually the top kind of budgets driving into this are the existing performance advertising and brand advertising budgets. And that's really important to bear in mind when you're thinking about the types of marketers, the types of media buyers that are looking at retail media and the measurement standards and metrics that they are used to. And then just building on that, a recent Cody survey found, it's US focused, but I think it's still important to bear in mind, found that actually the top three of the top five drivers, factors for driving investment in retail media are brand objectives. So it's no longer just a kind of bottom of the funnel, just performance execution or channel. People, brands and agencies and media buyers are looking at this to drive brand budgets. And again, really important for when we're thinking about the correct media measurements and metrics for retail media. Um, this is another kind of stats and more stats from our attitudes to retail media survey. Just kind of gives us a bit of context to, kind of the reason the reason we've done this. 58% of the buy side stakeholders, so that's both media agencies and brands, cited the fragmentation. So, the number of different retail media networks that exist in Europe. And actually, last time, we've been tracking this, and the last figure I had was around 140. It's probably more now. Retail media networks exist in Europe. Now that's huge. Like, that's not scalable. So that's one issue, and then also the lack of standardization is the other issue with investing. There are some other kind of barriers, the lack of tech, which I think we're starting to overcome with new players coming into the market. But yeah, I think the two key things that have really driven a lot of the work we've been doing are the lack of standards and the fragmentation. So why certification? So building on all of that, that's all kind of good background, but actually there's also a need, I think, for in any kind of new, emerging, growing channel or advertising area, if you like, for accountability, professionalization and accountability. And with that comes transparency. There's been a lot of news in the industry press around, the fact that actually there's no standards, there's no transparency, and that is starting to become, a problem for the buy side. So that's kind of why we've embarked on this program. So just before I go into a bit more detail about the certification program, I'm just going to give you a few kind of top line points about the standards that we've developed. And then if you want to know more about the standards, you can either ask at the end or we can follow up afterwards as well. So we've produced two sets of measurement standards for retail media. Between them, they cover the entire digital retail media ecosystem. So we've covered both on and off site. So, all of the digital ecosystem stuff for retail media, but then also digital in store. So we have a good grounding in coverage of the different retail media channels within our standards. The focus of certification right now, and I will come on to this, is the on and off site standard. So I'm going to talk a bit more about that. In store is not in scope for certification at this time. So what's covered in those standards? So we've covered everything in purple on this chart. So everything from the media metrics through to customer insights. So, the media metrics we have aligned with existing media metrics within digital media measurement. So thinking back to where those budgets are coming from, the performance, the brand budgets, we felt it was really important that we align investments in retail media as much as possible with those existing channels, particularly when it comes to things like how an ad impression is defined, how a click is defined, how a viewable impression is defined, etc. So that's all aligned. We then have what we would call sales metrics. So your ROAS. So we've defined ROAS. We've defined attribution windows. Media insights on top of that. So the share of voice of clicks. A bit more kind of building on the media metrics really. And then finally, what we call customer insights. So essentially, those metrics, those insights, you would only really get probably from a retail or commerce media platform, which would be things like new to brand and new to category. Everything in the blue, so brand sales insights and also incrementality, is not in scope right now. However, having said that, we've started work on producing measurement guidelines for incremental sales measurement. So we'll have more on that soon. Just wanted to touch on how we developed the standards. I think it's really important that everyone knows we did this, in collaboration with lots of different stakeholder groups. So we started out actually the end of 2023, talking to various different brands and buy-side stakeholders, understanding their pain points. We then took those, that kind of notion and some potential solutions to a retailer workshop at the beginning of last year. Around 15 retailers were in that, including Amazon. And we sat around a table for 1.5 days and essentially built the basis of what we have as the on and off site measurement standards today. We then took that, what we kind of wrote that up and took it for wider input, more retailers, more buy-side stakeholders. We then had an industry-wide public comment period running from March into April for about 6 weeks. And then the V1, what we call V1 of those on and off site measurement standards, was published April last year. For the in-store, a very similar process. The only difference was we worked very closely with the IAB in the US because they were working on the same project essentially at the same time. So we felt it made sense to have kind of one set of measurement standards for these things as much as possible. Just a couple of things to note on the standards that we've kind of had to slightly adjust for retail or retail media. So you will note, I mentioned that we've aligned as much as possible with existing media metrics. However, retail, as I'm sure you all know, is a different environment and does operate slightly differently. So there are a few adjustments we've had to make. For example, the definition of a click we haven't changed. However, what we have said is we've essentially added that, it's still a user-initiated action on an ad, but it could include directing to a brand or a product or a cart page, which you would have on a retail media network potentially. Viewability was also another another thing we had to think about, particularly for sponsored products. So sponsored products are obviously typically sold on a CPC basis. And so with this in mind, right now, viewability reporting for those ads is optional. However, we are asking, we published these obviously over 12 months ago. From this year onwards, we are asking retailers to add this to their reporting. And when we publish version 2 of the standards in a few months, that will become mandatory. The reason for this is, the viewability of an ad, it can impact the ROAS number. So that's kind of why we want to make sure that's covered. Then the other thing was the filtration of sophisticated invalid traffic. So it's really important that, ads for us as IAB to make sure the industry is delivering ads to humans, in viewable environments. So essentially, what we've said right now is in the standards that you don't have to filter for sophisticated invalid traffic, but you have to make it very clear in your reporting whether it's filtered or not. And so the media buyer has a clear view on whether that those metrics, those campaign measurements have been are free of invalid traffic or not. So just moving on to some kind of key facts about the certification. And this is, so what we're essentially doing is certifying that companies, so retailers and now ad tech companies, meet and comply with those measurement standards that I've just talked through quite top line. So who's going to be certified? So first of all, retailers. So we've just ran a pilot phase with an auditor with 2 retailers. I will come on to that shortly. And that's going to be complete very soon. And then we are now fully open for other retailers to sign up. Ad tech companies, we're now expanding the pilot phase too. So we want to start testing the audit and the compliance requirements with the ad tech companies. In terms of how companies are going to be audited and certified, so the companies will have to go undergo an independent audit with one of our independent auditors. So we're currently working with 3 auditors. They are ABC, AAM and CESP. And essentially, the company can choose which auditor they want to work with. They're all working to the same compliance table. Um, Once the audit is complete, the auditor will then present their kind of findings of that to us as the certification body. If the company has met at least 90% of the requirements, they will be able to get certification. And if not, they can make adjustments and have certain areas re-audited if needed. If needed. So yeah, so I think I've covered that. The certification is valid for 2 years, and then there are compliance tables both for retailers and ad tech companies, which outline exactly kind of what the auditors are going to look for in the process. Um, how are we governed? So we have a small certification advisory group comprised of 5 national federations and IABs, and also the chair of our Retail and Commerce Media Committee. It's really important that we've got this governance in place just to make sure, we are making the right decisions in terms of the auditors we work with, the process, etc. The other thing I wanted to touch on is how this works with other certification programs. This is a question I get asked quite a lot. So essentially, right now, there's no national certification program for retail media, and there's also no pan-European certification program for retail media. There are obviously existing programs for digital advertising, other areas, but not retail media. And so, as the kind of creator and owner, if you like, of the European measurement standards for retail media, we felt we were best placed to create this program. So essentially, in time, the program will be integrated into things like the IAB UK Gold Standard. I know they're planning to do that. The other organisation we've worked quite closely with is the MRC in the US. So for those of you who don't know, the MRC is the Media Rating Council. And it's essentially the organisation that audits or works with auditors to accredit different media and technology companies in the US. We've worked very closely with them just because I know some companies in Europe either already have an MRC accreditation, which covers obviously some of the requirements of the standards, and B, some retail media companies have been looking at potentially going through the MRC process. So you could go through an MRC audit and then also apply for European certification as long as the MRC audit can demonstrate that you've met the requirements of the European standards. So we have that agreement in place with the MRC. So current status, so as I mentioned, we've recently launched this program kind of fully open now for retailers, and I know there are some starting to explore how they undergo audit with the auditors. And we also now want to expand testing with some ad tech companies over the next few months to make sure that the kind of the compliance and the audit makes sense for those companies. Okay, a bit about the kind of benefits and how you as industry players can support the program. So I think the first thing that comes of any certification program is that credibility and that trust. So, if you have certification or you're working with certified companies, it kind of ensures that that company, whether it's the media network or an ad tech, meets industry standards. So you're all working on a level, trusted playing field. Compliance and transparency. So I mentioned it before, transparency in the retail media industry can be a bit of a problem, but the buy side want to really understand the reporting that they're getting out of the retail media networks, and having this certification will give them kind of transparency into what's in that reporting. More efficient media buying and planning. So hopefully by working with certified companies, media buyers, agency buyers can hopefully plan, execute and optimize their campaigns with those, and they know which media metrics are being used and how they're being used. Supporting self-regulation. This is a really important point for us as an industry. When our policy team are out talking to regulators and educating on the industry, it's really good for us to be able to demonstrate that the industry does take self-regulation seriously through things like certification programs. And then finally, enabling fair competition. It's important for us as an IAB to enable all players within the industry to kind of play on the same level playing field. So that's another kind of driver of this program. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how the buy side and can support, and then also how the sell side can support. So first thing I'm saying to everyone I'm talking to about this is just driving awareness, making everyone aware of the program and kind of why it's being developed. So one of the first things you could do if you're on the buy side is share the information about the program with those who you buy media from. Whether that's on the sell side or indeed on the buy side. Advocating for transparency. So, asking your partners, your retailers, if they actually have the certification or if they're planning to have certification, really advocating for more transparent reporting practices through things like industry certification. And aligning with other media, I think, is the other, making sure that retail media aligns with other media as much as possible. Obviously, it has lots of USPs, lots of data and insights that you can't get elsewhere, but essentially having that level playing field on things like impression delivery and viewable impressions is critical. And then I'm going to try not to repeat myself too much, but again, on the sell side, sharing the information, if you're a retailer, sharing the information with your ad tech partner to see if if they meet the standards, if they could be certified, that will help. If you are a retailer or an ad tech on the sell side, consider being certified, get certified and demonstrate your commitment to best practices and standardization. Again, advocate for transparency. So ask your partners if they are considering certification. And I'm not going to repeat the last point, which is again aligning with other digital media channels to enable buyers to compare investments easily. And then we do have lots of resources available, which we will share the links to, but we've got FAQs, press releases. There are obviously slides from this and our agency roadshows. We have overview decks for the retailers and ad tech companies now. And obviously we've also got the compliance tables for retailers and ad tech companies. And I think that's it from me. So maybe we have some questions.
Thank you, Mary-Claire. If anybody else, there's a few questions that have come through, but if anybody else has any questions, now is your, well, not your only time, but a prime time to ask any questions you've got. So do pop them in the box. I'm also just going to pop into the chat box for everyone as well, just a link to our landing page for the program, just so you can see a bit more there. There are some of the materials that Mary-Claire mentioned on that page, but what we're going to do is, following this session, we'll send you all an email afterwards with the links to everything that you need, as well as a link to this recording should you want to share it with teams and things like that. So yeah, always open to any questions. So yeah, thank you, Mary-Claire, for going through that with us. A couple of things that have come through. Firstly, a bit more detail around the kind of beta testing, specifically for ad tech companies. So what does the kind of beta test for ad tech include, and how might this differ from what the retailers are having to do?
So the compliance table for the ad tech is available online, and essentially the beta test is going to be the auditor, or whoever the ad tech company chooses to work with in terms of audit partner, going through that compliance with the ad tech and getting all of the information they need to undergo the audit. So it's essentially a kind of test of the audit for us, to make sure that audit kind of makes sense for given the compliance requirements we've written down, because obviously we've written down compliance requirements, but actually when it comes to reality and checking them, we need to make sure that all works. So that's essentially what the beta process is. It doesn't really differ from the retailers in that the kind of process will be very similar. I imagine some of the information and the ways the information is delivered to the auditors might be different, but actually the kind of, I guess, sentiment behind it, the reason for doing it is similar. You know, we want to make sure what we've developed as compliance requirements and the audit process that the auditors have set up will work and make sense, and kind of that will give us, well, particularly the auditor, but also us, any learnings going forward for how to refine the audit process.
And I guess just a little bit more thinking about obviously the ad tech element. So it's open fully at the moment to retailers. There's the beta test for ad tech. What are kind of any plans to roll out beyond that, maybe for like agencies or platforms? Are there kind of plans in motion for those?
So yes, there is on the roadmap plans to extend this to media agencies. Um, right now, that's not kind of available. We don't have the kind of compliance requirements written for agencies. So at the moment, and obviously the agencies are on the buy side, so we will have to think about how we test the standards with the buy side. So at the moment, that is definitely on our roadmap. So we're probably looking towards the end of this year or early 2026 until the program becomes available for agencies. I think hopefully it's clear to people we're trying to do it in a staged process. So starting with the sell side, the retailers, the ad tech that support them, and then moving onto the buy side eventually.
Yeah, and we can obviously share more information as and when those things
Absolutely.
come
Yeah.
up. So when people are interested and want to participate, we can obviously get more information shared at that point as well. Another question we've had come through is, and I'm guessing this might vary a little bit from kind of company to company, but what's kind of a typical timeline for achieving certification?
It's a great question. That is really going to depend on the company and the resources they have available. So, so we originally thought it would probably take, a few months for the process, but actually for some companies it's taken longer. I think because the retailers are potentially not as used to undergoing things like media audits right now. It's kind of a new thing to them, so they're having to learn as they go. Same for the auditors, they're not as used to working with retail businesses. It's taking, it takes some time to kind of back and forth and get all of the right information. So it really does depend on the company being audited, how much resource they have to put into it, how much time it's going to take them to deliver information back to the auditor. The auditors, so far have been really flexible and have been great. I'm kind of hoping on the ad tech side it might be quicker, because I think some of these ad tech companies are, they potentially may already have, for example, an MRC accreditation in place, which covers some of those standards requirements. Which, if everyone looks at the compliance table, if you have MRC accreditation for some of these things, it's just a tick box, as opposed to the auditor having to check those in more detail. So that can speed things up a bit and make the process a bit more efficient. So yeah, I mean, you probably it's probably average, 4 to 6 months at the moment, I think, but it could be quicker, it could be slightly longer.
Yeah, and I guess as more kind of companies on board, it's a process that we're learning and developing as well. So
Exactly. It's a real learning curve, I think, for the entire industry, this program. So yeah, and hopefully as we get further along, we can also speed things up a bit.
and I've got another question here, but if anyone else has any more, do pop them in. So kind of a couple of people have asked questions just around what kind of cost what's the cost to be certified? What kind of costs are entailed?
Yeah. So as much as we'd love to deliver this for free, we do have to, the auditors as well, they're all not for profit, but they have to fund their services. So there is an audit cost that the companies would need to discuss with the auditor directly.
Mhm.
That can vary. Again, it depends on the setup of the company being audited, how they deliver information, so how much how much time and resource is going to be needed from the auditor company. So there's the audit cost, and then there is a fee to IAB Europe for receiving certification. Now for retailers, it's a flat fee of €7,500. That is certification valid for 2 years. So
Mhm.
it's like €3,000 a year. So it's not a huge amount of money. And then for the ad tech, we've done a tiered costing, which is if you have media revenues, I'm gonna have to make sure I get this right, it's all in the FAQs as well, but if you have media revenues of below 50 million euros, I think it is, it's 7.5, and then if it's above, it's 15,000. So it just depends on where your media revenues fall in Europe. So
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay, great. So we haven't had any more questions come through, but I'm sure people, once they've digested some of the information that you've shared today, might have
yeah,
some more. So please do, if you do find that you've got any questions, you can reach out to us on the email address that you can see on the screen, obviously, or feel free to reach out to Marie Claire, myself on LinkedIn or through our emails, however best you want to contact us. We're always kind of happy to help answer any questions. And as we both mentioned, we will follow up with you all just to kind of share some more of the overviews and kind of information that we have available on this. But yeah, thank you very much for taking the time to join us this afternoon. We hope we were able to give you a bit more insight into the programme that we're very excited about and hope to get you kind of all involved at some point in your journey. But yeah, enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you all very soon.
thanks, Lauren. Thanks, everyone.